the death penalty, and Ghana today joins the rest of the world to mark the 17th World Day against the death penalty. Now, the 2019 World Day is focused on raising awareness of the inhumane living conditions of people who are sentenced to death. The World Coalition Against the Death Penalty reports that many testimonies documents the inhumane living conditions that people sentenced to death endure. Even though people on death row are entitled to the same basic rights and treatment conditions as other categories of prisoners, as set out in the UN Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners, that's the Nelson Mandela Rules, Amnesty Ghana is among those waging their campaign to get reforms, but this time to also bring to the fore the trauma of children sentenced to death. Joining me in the studio is Robert Akoto Amoafo. He's the director for Amnesty International Ghana. Good morning.
Good morning.
You know, Robert, it's very interesting because when we think of the death penalty, we actually haven't really focused on the children of people who are waiting to die.
Yeah.
And there must be a huge psychological toll on some of these children. Would you highlight some of those for us?
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. And yes, the plight of the children who have their parents on death row is terrible, especially for us in Ghana, where we have people on death row for over 10 years who have not been executed. So imagine the person has a child at home. It means that the child is going to have their parents on death row, not knowing when the parent is going to be executed, and the parent, him or herself, was also waiting psychologically, not knowing when they would also be executed. They can't fend for their children. Someone else needs to look after them because, of course, they can't do any economically viable thing to look after those children. So it's a very big problem that worldwide we have acknowledged, and we are calling it on today.
Okay, so the aspect of this that really bothers me as well is that since 1993, no execution has been recorded. And yes, we know that there are some people on death row. And we also know that apparently the president has to sign and then it can be revoked. So what exactly is the holdup? Because it is quite inhumane to have somebody waiting for 15, 16 years, knowing that, oh, they could die at any point, but not knowing exactly when they're going to die.
Yes, the history of presidents not signing the warrants for people to die has been there with us from the time of President Kufuor to the time of President Mills to the time of President Mahama. We have seen all these things that they don't sign the death warrant. So we are calling on our president now to take a bigger move, you know, to let us move forward towards total abolish from our laws. Ghana is identified as an abolitionist by practice. It means that we don't practice the death penalty by execution. But at the end of the day, the fact that the people are still on death row and we still send people to the prisons on death row is a big issue, and therefore there's a need for us to clear it. Let's take one standard. The president can basically start by giving a moratorium on death penalty, which is, and also say on executions, which says that all the people on death row, no one should be executed.
Okay.
And then from there we move on.
I mean, that's a good start, because then at least you know that if you're on death row, you are not going to be killed. You are going to be able to live out your life.
Yes.
So that's one aspect of it. Okay, and then from
there, then we put them on imprisonment, on life in parole, and then without parole. Sorry. And then after that, we can look at reviewing our laws.
Okay.
Currently, in the Criminal Offences Act 1960, there are provisions to ensure that people are put on death row. Now, how can we ensure that we take it out? Also, we can see these examples in countries like Benin and all the other countries that have taken it out of their laws by parliament. So that one is the next step. Then we go to the bigger one, which is the Constitution, which will require, because the death penalty is an enshrined provision, it's in the Constitution.
Okay. But out of curiosity, are there not crimes that are committed that you think warrant the death penalty?
And anyway, you agree with me that even the people who helped us with these laws have taken it out of their laws. And we have seen that even when they took it out of their laws, there's not been any repercussions.
I mean, the same can be said for Christianity. The people who brought Christianity have walked away from Christianity. The fact that they've walked away from it doesn't make it a good thing.
No, but you see, you know, they haven't walked away totally from Christianity, but the thing is, we believe worldwide, over 140 countries have taken it out of their laws. And we believe that with the existence of the death penalty, it doesn't serve us in any way. For instance, we have it in our laws. People still commit crime. We put them on death row. At the end of the day, even if it's not there, we have other means of punishing them so that they become beneficial to us and the society and the government as a whole.
Okay, so is it because we're not implementing the death row, the death penalty properly, that it is not serving as a deterrent? Do you think that that is the problem? I know that you're fighting against it,
yes.
but I mean, if we're having a conversation, then we might as well have an all-rounded one.
Yes, I mean, examples are in other countries where they implement it and they still have these crimes happening.
Okay.
I mean, crimes in America have never decreased. In other countries where they still have some of these death penalty has never shown any decrease because they still implement the death penalty. And similar to vis-a-vis other countries that have taken the death penalty out of their laws. So it's a holistic thing. We are just saying that there's a better way, and because we think that life is sacrosanct, that is the main thing. We believe that life is something that when it's given to somebody, no one, not a government, not a president having the power to take life out of a person. Once you take the life out of a person, you have denied the person all other rights that they could be entitled to. And the similar thing as the person took somebody's life, and we don't want that to happen. We don't want the government to also do similar to somebody else.
So you've been fighting this for a very long time. Are you seeing any movement at all?
The first step is that, thankfully...
I mean, especially now that we have a lawyer as president.
Yes. Thankfully, none of the presidents have signed the death warrant since 1993, which is a good move. We've had some of the presidents taking people off death row into life imprisonment. We are still waiting for our current president to do that, especially because we know him to be a human rights person and also a lawyer, to give people amnesty onto life imprisonment. And then also we are seeing the fact that now there's a conversation. Now, before, it was a very difficult conversation to have, especially in the period when insecurity was high.
Right.
And now that we are having the opportunity to have a conversation with religious leaders, parliamentarians, now we see a shift in the ideology. I'm sure before, it was another president saying, why do you want us to take the death penalty out? But now we are seeing a conversation happening, which we think is a good thing.
What's the biggest concern with the death penalty? Apart from the fact that life is sacrosanct, I mean, what are some of the biggest concerns? That one,
it has an impact on society as a whole. For instance, the fact that somebody committed a crime and the person is going to be put on death, to death, and the fact that the impact on the family, the impact on the children as we are raising today, and the fact that we believe that the country can benefit more if they put people on death, on life imprisonment.
How?
Because one, if the person is alive, there's a possibility of...
The person's alive, you're feeding them, you're clothing them, you're paying for their housing or their allowance in the prison. Our prisons are full up and beyond capacity. So what would be the advantage of keeping someone alive?
We believe that labor is a good thing for us as a country. I mean, if we invest in ensuring that these people are given the needed skills and then given the job to do, so that some of these taxes that we pay to do other jobs like reading the Parliament House or some places could be given to these people to do, which will be beneficial to us.
So for example, I mean, if you have a serial killer who's killed maybe 25 women, are you comfortable with this serial killer weeding the pavement outside your house?
So then we move to the discussion of ensuring that our prisons have good conditions that ensure that they provide the services that is required. So we know that one of the biggest problems that brings about the death penalty is the fact that we think that when somebody is sent to prison, the person should be punished, the person should be like dealt with so hard.
Yeah, we don't have a rehabilitative culture.
Exactly. So then if we are able to think about it as that way, that rather when we send somebody there, give the person the psychological support, the psychotic support, the person needs it, and the support for them to get skills that will be useful to themselves and their family. And another benefit will be that if the person is able to do something, you know, some people work in prison and they are paid some little token. It can help the person take care of the family even as they are there as well. You know, so I think these are some of the things that we believe could be beneficial to us.
But this year you're focusing on the impact that it has on the children of people who are sentenced to life to the death penalty. Sorry. What's the plan concerning them, and what does Amnesty International want to do with some of these children?
So first of all, we want to highlight their situation. We have visited the prisons and spoken to some of the prisoners on death row and know some of their families, and we've talked to some of these people. So we want to highlight their situations through the discussions that we'll have in the engagement, and then also start talking about the need to provide services. Because of course, if you put somebody on death row and you kill the person, how, if the person was the only parent of that child, how does the person survive?
How does the child survive?
How does the child survive? And all those ones are what we are looking at.
Right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Today's World Day Against the Death Penalty. Thank you very much, and we wish you well.
Thank you very much.
We hope that it comes to pass, but even more importantly, we hope that our whole prison system, gets a major reform and gets some attention as well.
You mentioned about the constitutional review, and I think it's a very important thing for us. It was a very key advocacy tool for the abolishment of the death penalty. Unfortunately, it has stalled, and there are a lot of other provisions that could go to the benefits of the country, but it has stalled, and therefore we are calling on the government to bring it back. At least if there are certain provisions we need to look at again, they should let us discuss. But to stall it and we don't know where it's going and what's the next, it's a big problem for us.
That seems to happen quite a lot, doesn't it? But thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Robert Akoto Amoafo.